Mandragora refers to the root of a mandrake, a plant with an eerily human-like appearance surrounded by old European folklore. The mandrake was believed to grow from the ground where suffering occurred, sometimes underneath gallows where someone had been hanged, and when pulled from the ground, it was said to release a scream so unbearable that it could kill anyone who heard it. To understand Mandragora, you have to understand the real events and conditions the film is reflecting. After the fall of communism in 1989, the Czech Republic shifted rapidly into a market economy. Borders opened, travel was easier, and foreign money started flowing in. During the 1990s, the Czech Republic became a destination for sex tourism, especially in Prague, the busy capital of the country. Coming up in post-communist Czech Republic, where many had an optimistic outlook for the future, many families were still faced with poverty, crime, and social collapse. In the early 90s, boys escaping abusive homes gravitated towards the train stations in Prague. The train stations became their gathering point because they offered constant motion and anonymity. The stations were open all night and full of passing strangers, people who wouldn't ask questions, people moving too quickly to notice a boy sleeping in a corner or lingering around without direction. The constant flow of travelers created an opportunity. Once the borders opened, foreign tourists poured into Prague. This high traffic volume also brought in predators who turned these train stations into hunting grounds. People with bad intentions began noticing the influx of boys aimlessly wandering because they simply had nowhere else to go. These stations became known for something unspoken but widely understood. If you were a runaway boy, if you were desperate, if you had nowhere to go, someone would find you there. Polish filmmaker Victor Grodecki would make a 3-part series based on this issue, starting with Not Angels, but Angels.
Vítáme vás na hlavním nádraží, zde se tady schází turisti, převážně cizinci, co potřebují nebo hledají chlapce, mladší do těch 20 let. Já se snažím pomáhat teda mladým lidem, nebo hlavně dohazu, nebo jako dohazu jim kšefty, aby si nějaký peníze vydělali. Pokud teda přijde nějaký cizinec do Prahy, tak se s tím cizincem pokusím tak nějak navázat kontakt, když neumím teda cizinu, tak nějak po ruce, nebo tak nějak podrobně, aby jsme se spolu domluvili, když se tomu cizincovi líbí mladý člověk, tak ho s ním seznámím, oni se pak spolu domluví, kam spolu mají odjet, jestli mají jet na hotel nebo na privát.
Much like the boys in this documentary, there were other children who vanished, whose names were never reported, children whose deaths went unnoticed. Whether it was due to their family's neglect, never caring to report them missing in the first place, or stigma from the police who never bothered to look for them. The demand for these boys came from older men, locals, tourists, businessmen who traveled to Prague specifically because the city had gained an underground reputation for underage prostitution. When runaway boys disappeared, a lot of times their involvement with men placed them outside of the category of innocent victims. Their lives were already written off. If you've ever seen Lilja Forever, you may recognize the similar themes here. Both films depict the way childhood abandonment combined with poverty creates a situation where trafficking becomes almost inevitable. The name Mandragora in the context of the film essentially means if you plant a child in violence, you shouldn't be surprised when something violent grows. Mandragora is a story about what the world creates when it fails to protect young boys. I think this goes without saying, but this is a very graphic film with just about every content warning you can imagine. It's brutal for a reason though, because the story it tells is based directly on real people. It's a reflection of what was actually happening at the time. The film opens with a group of boys breaking into a display case for whatever items of value they can grab. This is the world where we meet Marek. He's a 15-year-old boy who spends his time wandering the train station, skipping school, and wasting away hours in a casino he is far too young to be in. His life is directionless, but not entirely hopeless yet. Sort of just in a boring, quiet limbo. But this changes the moment he's approached by an older man at the station. The predatory intent is immediate. The man says he can offer him work and showers him in compliments about how attractive he is, which makes it clear what kind of work he's talking about. Marek refuses, brushing off the offer like many boys probably had before him. But when he gambles all his money away and gets mugged later that same day and stripped of his shoes, we can already see crime is rampant with the youth in this area. With nowhere to go, Marek returns to the man with the work offer. The man calling himself Hansa establishes control immediately. He insists on keeping Marek's earnings safe, claiming it's for his own protection. He leads the boy off to a client's house. The client refers to Marek as a young rabbit, and then corrects himself. He's not just a rabbit, but a bunny. It's a coded way to signal that Marek is not simply young looking, but actually a minor. They talk about how youthful he is right in front of him, as if he's a novelty item, something to be purchased. Marek wakes up the next morning knowing that something irreversible has happened. Once he returns home the next morning, his father responds not with concern, but violence, when it becomes obvious that he hadn't been at school and had been skipping for a very long time. But there's no further attempt to understand why, he just hits him instead. Whatever was already broken between them becomes final in that moment, and Marek runs away. Hansa slowly but surely works his way into showing Marek the ropes of his new life, leading him to a drag bar, where the only demographic occupying that building is concerningly very young looking boys. The conversations taking place here reveal that these boys are all facing extremely harsh life conditions. Some have already spent time in prison, one boy flashes a gun, some casually talk about how many men they've slept with for money. The desensitization of it all. You realize that every single boy in this bar is being sexually exploited, and they have been for a very long time, while Marek was only just getting started. Even here, where every boy is a victim, there's a hierarchy system in place. A group of boys who have been in the scene longer control access to clients. They demand payment. They tax anyone who tries to work in the bar. When Marek refuses to comply with this, he is beaten immediately. Unlike the others, David approaches him with kindness, coming off very disarming. Marek sees two boys in the bar showing affection for one another. It's likely this is the first time he's seen anything like this. The camera lingers just long enough to convey the point that Marek begins to believe that he has found a place where he belongs. David quickly takes a liking to Marek, placing him under his wing and forming a close friendship. Right after meeting each other, he quickly convinces Marek to run away from Hansa and report him to the police. It almost feels like an act of liberation, like the two of them are choosing each other over this creepy evil guy controlling them. But once Hansa gets taken away, David quietly steps into the role of the one in control. Marek begins to rely on him for direction, and slowly, David learns that he can use that reliance for power. The boys rank their way up to even higher paying clientele, while Marek dreams of using the money that they've been earning to buy a restaurant someday, showing that he had hopes to eventually change the direction of his life. David has other plans, suggesting that they should instead use the money they saved to operate their own whorehouse, as he calls it. David takes the initiative to invest in a local pimp named Sasha, giving away the 30,000 crowns they profited the previous night. However, this deal goes down in front of Marek, who wasn't even informed of this being a serious thing before meeting with them. One problem with Sasha's operation was that he didn't have an attractive boy working for him that would be willing to provide receptive services. David then takes this opportunity to work with Sasha, selling his own friend to an English client for just 300 pounds. This revealing that reporting Hansa to the police was not just some initiative to get his friend away from an abusive pimp, but rather David kind of coming up with his own little business plans in his head, making himself the new ringleader. This left Marek with no choice in the matter, so he goes off with the man. Marek notices some photographs on the table, images of restraints and mutilation, foreshadowing what was to come. For the most uncomfortable 10 minutes of my life, this guy goes on and on forever about how Marek's body is the best work of art in existence, and then making him cosplay as some sort of knight statue. This really weird fetish situation takes a really dark turn, going back to the things we saw in those photos. When Marek later confronts the boys, furious that they allowed him to walk into a situation where he was nearly mutilated and killed, they shrug him off as if he's overreacting. Their expressions are all careless and blank. Harm becomes normalized in this group because their survival requires not only enduring violence, but also participating in it when necessary themselves. Marek really tries to break through through this numbness that has a hold on these boys, but they were already way too deep inside the system to recognize the corruption that they were repeating. And in that moment, the film also suggests something even heavier. These boys have been in this for so long, but once they were Maric too. Just like him, they were once new and probably tried to resist, to speak up when something was wrong, only to be ignored or even brutalized by the other boys in the group. The cycle didn't begin with them, and it definitely wasn't ending with them. Despite this, Maric doesn't know how to leave. This is just his life at the moment, so the night continues on. Maric and David cross paths with two girls their age walking the streets. One of them casually offers sex without protection. We all have got it anyway. This is someone who stopped imagining a future for themselves altogether. The boys decide that they want out of Sasha's operation, but they're still trapped by the logic of survival. When Sasha pressures them into taking on another client, an American man who was permanently relocated to Prague, a foreigner with money, they see an opportunity. Once inside his hotel room, they rob him, take his money and run. And with the stolen cash, David decides to visit his family outside of the city. They turn up at his father's house, but Maric refuses to go inside. After everything he's endured with his own family, being in the vicinity of a functioning family was probably unbearable. David stands at the door, but can't bring himself to knock. The shame is overwhelming. David had been gone for 2 years, and in that time, you can imagine the kind of things he must have gotten into. He sold his body, stolen, manipulated friends, and become someone he doesn't recognize. The weight of returning like that was way too much to carry, so they leave. When the boys encounter a group of men from David's hometown at a bar, his secret becomes known, and the confrontation nearly turns violent. The men recognize him as a runaway. It turns out that David also had a girlfriend back at home, and she learns the truth about him, not through his own confession, but through the humiliation of the men who are aware of what runaway boys in Prague who return home get up to. The double life he tried to maintain, the idea that he could survive in Prague and still return to who he once was, is taken away from him. But even with all of this, by now, David has full control over Maric. He then starts pushing him into victimizing others, starting with mugging an elderly woman, something he doesn't want to do, but David insists. Sometimes corruption happens little by little until the person you were is gone. Soon after this, everything falls apart rapidly. The police are looking for David and Maric because of their robberies, and Hansa is released from jail. Of course, the boys weren't willing to talk to the police. Doing so would have meant exposing themselves to arrest for prostitution, being sent back home, or being placed in state custody. By this point, every boy in that circle has committed crimes of their own, and so the police had no evidence or incentive to keep Hansa detained. In desperation for money, they go to a so-called filmmaker named Krusa who needed actors for his homemade project. You know what kind of film I'm getting at. The other boys participate and just do what they're told, but Maric can't seem to get into it at all, and he doesn't perform to the filmer's liking. So he then suggests to him that the best way to improve the video would be for Maric to be the receiver of unprotected penetrative sex for the next scene, in hopes of making up for his weak performance so that the video would sell well. He chooses to pair him with David. Maric, however, completely wants out of this and detests the idea of having unprotected sex, but David shuts him up into submission like he always does. Later, one of the other boys named Libor becomes a big piece at the end, a boy who's been competing with David for power in the group since Hansa's arrest. He arranges for David to meet at a hotel, the same one that he had robbed that American man at earlier. He had set him up. David is then assaulted and arrested. Whatever little scraps of loyalty was left in this group completely collapses. Maric has also picked up a heavy cough ever since the trip with David, an early symptom of something you might already be picking up on. Once Maric's only friend was gone, the drugs increase. One evening, after mixing cocaine and speed, he hallucinates that he's back with David, talking as if nothing's changed. But he suddenly realizes something. David's skin is covered in lesions. When he wakes up from this drug-induced hallucination, Libor confirms without concern that David was diagnosed with AIDS in prison, meaning it was only a matter of time before it caught up with him too. Meanwhile, Marek's father has been looking for him this entire time, but the police don't do much to help. He was just another runaway. His father takes the initiative to look for his son on his own. He gets word on common runaway hangout spots and finds the drag bar where Marek once worked. But there's an entirely new group of boys working there who mistake him as just being another old sleazy client. He tries prying to get a true understanding of what kind of things these boys truly get up to, and when one of them lists the services he offers and their prices, the father understands that whatever remains of his son is beyond his reach. The father understands that his son sold his body for the same, for almost pennies. It's not tragic just because he finds out what his son has been doing this whole time, but also for just how little his son was valued. He pays the boy and walks away, not because he actually wanted the services, but because he's just so overwhelmed with grief for what his son and boys like him have been forced to endure. Krusa's apartment is eventually raided, but Hansa and Sasha continue their operations without interruption. Nothing really changes. Marek returns to the train station, the place where everything began, and locks himself in a bathroom stall. This is a person who has ran out of exits. He decides to take his fate into his own hands. Instead of waiting for the inevitable slow death awaiting him, he takes a syringe and overdoses quietly, while his father unknowingly stands on the other side of the door, just inches away. Another boy enters the station, presumably continuing the same path Marek went down, Hansa lurking around in the shadows. This film is not constructed to be aesthetically beautiful. The camera often feels observational, as if it were placed in the corner of a room simply to record what would have happened regardless of whether a film crew was present. Somewhere around the halfway point, it didn't even feel like I was watching a movie anymore. Once this film draws you in, it really sucks you in for good. The more I paid attention, the heavier it became. There were moments while editing this video that genuinely felt draining, like I was genuinely sick to my stomach reading some of this stuff, knowing how real it all was. The saddest thing to me is thinking about all the other kids that went missing in real life and were just never found, that were just like Marek. There's no relief in this story. Mandragora is relentless. If you want to watch the film for yourself, it's available for free on Tubi. I would genuinely appreciate hearing your perspective. I know this was a super dark video, but I hope you guys left learning something new from it. Thank you to the person that recommended this movie to me. I don't remember who it was, I just know it was somewhere under the kids video, but I really appreciate it. We're gonna continue out the rest of this year with some super sad films, so get your tissue boxes ready. Make sure you follow me on Rumble in case any issues come up with this video, and I'll see you in the next one.